Um, who? Okay. Okay, why don't you start off like introducing yourself?
Hi, everybody. Then my name's Rich. I have BPD and MPD, and I talk about it on a channel called Early Morning Barking.
I love.
And
Okay.
we co
Oh,
yeah.
please continue, please continue.
I was just going to say I cover as much of both things as I can. There's a mix of both, and sometimes it's each one individually, but I mostly do sort of BPD related content.
Okay, so okay, first tell me how did you come up with the name early morning bugging? Because I find that really funny. Honestly, it's the first thing
Um,
I
it's a rather unglamorous story. Um, I was at home, and my girlfriend at the time was about to take the dog out for a walk.
Okay.
And I was actually just I was sat trying to think of a name at the time this happened. And as I could hear them downstairs getting ready to go out, he started barking, and I heard it go, "Shush, it's too early for barking." And it was, oh, there you go, it's early morning barking. There we go. And that was just where it came from. That's it.
Okay, okay, it's actually funnier because it's not that. Okay, I love that. Okay, so like, how did you find out you had BPD? This one's like,
Um, right. Well, I mean, it was a long journey to
mhm,
get to it. Um, it's something that's been with me my entire life. All my childhood memories are littered with these feelings that have always been with me, but they really started to come to the forefront and affect me day to day when I was about 18 and moved away to university for the first time and that sort of
mhm,
thing. And I sort of lost the structure and boundaries of childhood and moved into adulthood, and that was when things started to really get uh, rather pronounced and
mhm.
difficult for me. And it started off by me being diagnosed with depression. Just, oh, you're depressed, here's some antidepressants, go away, kind of thing. And that continued for sort of the next 20 years.
Okay.
I was on various antidepressants constantly. Um, Occasionally I'd feel worse,
Mhm.
and the doctors would decide, oh, that antidepressant has stopped working. You should have a different one now, and they'd give me a different one, and I'd go away and not feel any better. But you keep taking the tablets and
Mhm.
doing the thing. Um, and it just kept getting worse and worse. And the antidepressants weren't doing anything. I wasn't depressed. I had BPD. And so it eventually all came to a head sort of in late 2018,
Okay.
when they finally accepted, do you know what? Maybe after 20 years, you don't have depression. Maybe we should stop giving you antidepressants every time you ask for them. Um, and then I went through sort of a few months of seeing mental health specialists, referrals, that sort of thing,
Mhm.
assessments. And then it was finally concluded that the best thing for me would just be therapy, get him into group therapy. And there happened to be a group therapy starting in my area that I could join. And it was sort of after, let's see, I started that in April 2019.
Okay.
And it was sort of October, November of that year
Mhm.
when it was sort of all of these symptoms that they're saying you have. And I had a letter from my therapist to my doctor. I had a copy of that sort of listed all the problems I had and all everything that was going wrong. And you look down this list, and it was a list of uh, BPD symptoms. It was basically describing BPD without saying BPD, because of course therapists don't want to give you that uh, definite diagnosis. They're very cagey about doing such
It's
things.
stigmatized there.
It can be they can be doing it to sort of protect you from the stigma to a certain extent, and because you don't really one, especially for me, once I was in therapy,
Mhm.
that exact diagnosis became less important. I was getting the help that I needed
Yeah.
without them saying, hey, you've got BPD.
Uh-huh.
And one of the most common things that happens with it is people hear that they've got BPD, And then they find a way to make sure that they've got every marker and every problem that comes with it. It just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so a therapist will try for as long as possible to not give you a diagnosis. They may know what your diagnosis is and be treating you for it, but they don't necessarily need you to know.
Yeah.
Um, and so it took a while, and it was sort of like part way through that you realize, hang on, I've got BPD, haven't I? And it reached the point where I started referring to my BPD in group sessions and talking about it and that sort of thing, because I was doing my own research and looking into it.
Mhm.
And you could sort of see the therapist not rushing to correct me ever. They never went, there was never a hang on, you haven't got BPD. There was never any of that. They just sit there quietly and keep making notes and, oh, he's figured it out, that sort of thing. And so I didn't actually see it written down as a diagnosis
Mhm.
until actually a couple of months ago, when it became necessary for me to get a sick note from my doctor that had it written on. And so, yeah, the actual official diagnosis
Mhm.
for a lot of people may never come. But that doesn't stop you being treated for it
Right.
or getting help.
Mhm. Okay, so uh, do you think for you, if like your symptoms were like treated, but like no one ever told you you had BPD, you would have felt better? Because some people don't like being labeled, I have a disorder, you know what I mean?
Yeah, some people don't like it. I mean, and I get that. And for the length of my treatment, I was fine with that. You
Okay.
know, it was totally okay with me. I know some people. I think it depends where you live
Okay.
and what medical systems there are where you live and that sort of thing as to how important a diagnosis is.
Mhm.
I get the impression that like, for example, in the United States, I think that people are more uh, eager to get a diagnosis for medical insurance reasons and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas in the UK here, it's not that important unless a situation arises in which you need to prove to somebody else, to a third party, that you have BPD,
Okay.
which was sort of what happened in my case. But yeah, it's as long as you're getting the help, it's okay. That diagnosis isn't as important.
Absolutely. But how did that clash with you getting NPD? Because now
Hmm.
uh, I'm very interested because a lot of times like both the things clash with each other. And honestly, it's very difficult to sometimes even differentiate between the two because there's a lot of clash, right? So
Yeah.
begin with that.
There's not as much clashing as you would think.
Really?
Yeah, they both come from the exact same place, which
Good.
is fears and traumas and that sort of thing. They just sort of come out of you in different ways.
Okay.
Um, I always like to think, like, I don't have BPD and also have NPD. It's like BPD, NPD is a separate thing. The way it interacts is very different. And so it comes across as, when I talk to people who are just NPD or just BPD,
Mhm.
there's a lot of crossover, but some things are very different.
Good.
Um, and of course, you don't have to have all 9 markers of each thing
Mm.
to qualify as having it. So for the one that everybody brings up is the empathy, for example, because you
Oh,
have BPD on the one hand that is known for having very big empathy for, and then you've got MPD that is known for having no empathy at all.
mhm.
And I was quite lucky in that I have the BPD great deal of empathy
Mhm.
without the lack of empathy, and that sort of keeps some of the narcissism in check,
Okay.
because I have shame and guilt. I don't want to, I know when I've upset somebody or hurt somebody, and I feel
Yeah.
bad about that. I don't want to do that, and so I have that sort of that self control that might not come with pure NPD.
Okay, nice.
Uh, and yet at the same time, I, because of that NPD, have a number of coping mechanisms for the BPD
Okay.
that weren't there, that wouldn't be there otherwise. Um, there are times when I think that the best example of that is sort of when your BPD is dragging you down and making you feel like you don't deserve anything, or you're rubbish, you're worthless, all that sort of thing. I
Mhm.
have the MPD that picks me up on the other side and goes, "Hang on,
Okay.
you're worth a lot. You're amazing. You're brilliant. Ignore all that." And the two will argue with each other, and one will drown the other out.
Mhm.
Um, and so it brings this interesting mix of the two together that
Mhm.
is not quite like each of the two individually, but yeah, brings with it its own sort of similar sets of problems along the way.
Okay.
And it's quite a common thing. I think there are studies that show sort of as many as sort of 39-40% of people with BPD
Mhm.
meet the diagnostic criteria for MPD as well.
Mhm.
And so it's actually a fairly common thing that people with a cluster B personality disorder will have one of the others as well, or at least some markers of the others.
Oh, okay, yeah, I do find that very interesting because okay, so I have had at least a lot of people in my life who've had borderline. So and it was very interesting to notice how each person with borderline was very different from the other. Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I've seen a different kind of borderline. Um and I'm someone who really like I don't like abandon easily unless like things get like really, really bad. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so and I wanted to be there for my friends. So I know I started studying borderline and I was like, okay, they have a fear of abandonment. So I like keep reassuring them that a lot. But then I started seeing like a contradiction. Okay, like this person's telling me something different, this person's telling me something different. So
Yep.
one person in particular told me she feels no empathy at all. So I was like, okay, this is something I've not heard from a borderline person, but I have seen a lot of ASPD traits there with the person who has diagnosed borderline. So I was like, okay, I think a lot of people with borderline have a lot of traits from the other cluster Bs, and I think that does play like a
Yeah,
role.
absolutely. Yeah, I've heard arguments for sort of doing away with the different personality disorders altogether and just say, we put all these traits in a big hat and you pick out the ones that you're going to suffer with. And it's grouping them is helpful to a degree, but it seems there is so much crossover between all of them, and it can depend on what day of the week you're on, what mood you're in. When you look at these criteria, there are certainly some. When you look at the criteria, say for ASPD, for antisocial personality disorder, there are some that are very similar to NPD, and
Correct.
they're worded differently. That and you just think, if I was assessed on a different day of the week and I was in a bad mood or whatever, I could see somebody ticking some of these boxes by mistake and that sort of thing. So they're all much of a muchness. It's just a big gooey ball of personality disorder, to be honest.
I mean, I think that's why it's called a cluster. Honestly, I think they were like, you know what, let's just throw it all in. um,
Exactly.
yeah. Okay, but this one is something a lot of people don't agree even exists. So and I felt like a lot of people in my family like have it. But what is quiet BPD? Because I don't know what that is because I'm like, okay, this sounds like someone who's
Right.
stable, but like it's kind of not like going with what usually like a borderline person would do. So I was just like, okay, what is quiet BPD? How does that even work?
Yeah, I'm personally on a little bit of a crusade about quiet
Yeah.
BPD at the moment, because it's not really a thing. It's there's nothing in science, there's nothing in medicine to back this up at all.
Mhm,
Where it comes from, there was a therapist a number of years ago
mhm.
who took it. His hobby was basically making up subcategories of personality disorders, and
Okay.
he made them up for all of the personality disorders.
All right.
And he wrote and sold books about all these things, and there's nothing in science to back it up at all. But what it is it's great for blog posts, for YouTube videos, for that sort of thing. And what I find interesting is the only one people, there are 4 subcategories that this guy made up, and the only one people ever claim they've got is quiet BPD. No one ever claims one of the other 3. I'm not even sure off the top of my head what the other 3 are, because no one mentions them. You'll get people, oh, I have quiet BPD. Oh, really, do you? And it's, as you say yourself, when you talk to different people with BPD and ask them what it's like for them, you get a different answer from everybody.
Yeah.
And so some people don't behave in the way that is stereotypically BPD. It doesn't mean that they don't have BPD or they've got a special type of it or anything like that. It's just that's how their BPD is playing out.
Mm-hmm.
And further subcategorizing it
Mm-hmm.
is a fairly pointless and useless exercise. The treatment that you would get doesn't change. You still go to therapy and talk to the same therapists about the same traumas and fears and that sort of thing. It's from a medical standpoint, there's no reason for quiet BPD to exist at all. And so, yeah, it's I don't know. It seems something that in this day of people trying to find what's wrong with them, and I totally get when people are feeling bad and they want to find a name for it.
Mm-hmm.
They want to say, I've got this thing and this is the treatment for this and that sort of thing. It feeds into that, and so it's something I'm not a big fan of. Personally, I think it just adds to further complicate things for people.
Absolutely.
And so yeah, quiet BPD, it's a tricky one. But it's, yeah, I mean, I'm prepared for it to be a thing. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, but the people who are say
Mm-hmm.
it's, they're not doing any research, they're not looking into it. No one has written anything about it since the original person.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know. It's not something I've ever thought I have or would say somebody else has or anything like that.
Oh yeah, I get. I think the thing with quiet PPD is it also sounds a lot like codependency. So I don't feel like people should like sit and diagnose every little thing, because we are gonna have a little bit of the traits if we all have trauma, right? Like we are gonna have a little bit of here and there. So oh okay. Bagisha has a question for you. Just a second. Could you tap upon bipolar and BPD and how it can be miscategorized as the other?
Um, a little bit. I'm not really that up on bipolar,
Mm-hmm.
because obviously I can only speak to my own experience, and I don't have bipolar.
Mm-hmm.
Um, from what I gather,
Mm-hmm.
there are similar but different symptoms and the way it plays out.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I think someone with bipolar, they have the manic periods and the low periods, and that can be easily mistaken for the high and low periods of BPD.
Mm-hmm.
The main difference is that with bipolar, those manic phases and low periods can last weeks, whereas with BPD, that can be 10 minutes. BPD is a much more volatile thing, as I understand it. But yeah, I think that as with a lot of the cluster B personality disorders, there are things that look similar,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes a lot of assessment and a lot of interviewing and talking to patients and that sort of thing to really get to the heart of it. And so I think, that is another reason I think why they're not too worried about giving out an official diagnosis if they don't have to. If
Mm-hmm.
they can get you into therapy, that's all that matters. That's the main thing. That's getting you help. That's getting you better. And they can take it from there. And a therapist who spent months, weeks, years with you
Mm-hmm.
would be much better placed later to say, do you know, I think maybe you do have bipolar, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think on face value, the two seem to be able to be mixed up quite a lot. And I see something similar with ADHD as well, that a lot of ADHD symptoms will get picked up as being BPD or MPD or something like that.
Mm.
Excuse my doorbell going off.
Okay.
Uh, and so yeah, that's it. But as I say, I'm not a medical professional, so my expertise on bipolar is somewhat non-existent.
Though I totally the ADHD part was really interesting to me because it's very funny to me. Every person that I know who has a personality disorder has ADHD. I do not know one single person who has. Do you have ADHD?
I'm
You don't mind me
I'm awaiting assessment for ADHD.
asking.
Yeah, I'm not in any way officially diagnosed, but
Okay.
I probably have
Have it?
ADHD. There's you know, when I first got into therapy, I had a whole long list of things that I needed to deal with.
Mhm,
These symptoms, the way I differed from whatever normal is.
mhm, mhm.
And a lot of those things were cleared up by therapy. All the BPD and a lot of the MPD stuff doesn't really affect me day to day.
Yeah.
But there's this whole long list of things
Mhm.
that look like ADHD that weren't touched by therapy. That looks like it might need a lot more sort of maybe DBT, maybe even medication, that kind of thing to help me out. The other thing that sort of came to light was when I started doing early morning barking and started doing live streams, and it more so on TikTok, is I would have people who didn't know who I was turn up to live streams and within 5 minutes ask, "Is this an ADHD show?" No, but thank you for being another person that thinks I act like I have ADHD. And clearly it's been enough for me to go to the doctor and say I need an assessment. But unfortunately, getting an assessment through the NHS at the moment is a lengthy process. I've been told
Okay,
sort of 2.5 years from this point. um
that's a lot.
It's a lot. It really is. But I mean, politically over here at the moment, we're in a situation where the NHS isn't being funded as well as it could. Mental health services in general aren't being
Okay.
funded as well as they could be. And simply just availability of professionals and therapists and that sort of thing, coupled with, I think, people becoming much more self-aware of their mental health, of realizing that they might have a problem that they can get help with, and then seeking out that help means
Okay.
I think there are a lot more people looking for help these days.
Uh-huh.
So, when it comes to NHS mental health services, which were, I don't think there's ever been a time when they were what they could be.
Okay.
It's always been a very underfunded, underthought about area in the NHS. And so when funding keeps being cut and cut further and that sort of thing, waiting times go up and everything along with it. I could pay for a private assessment,
All right. Yeah.
but that costs what it costs. That is a prohibitively costly thing to get into.
I think if you convert it here, um, you pay $80. That's it. You can get diagnosed. You can get like. Actually, no. I think a lot of people would like literally get you diagnosed for like nothing. In India, that's why it almost feels like a free handout. Like, okay, you know what? Hey, you have ADHD. Hey, you have ADHD. um, but can you like talk about so I'm a little more aware of how like narcissism works a little more than borderline for sure, but I've obviously had like hand in hand experience with like a ex-partner who had borderline, so I kind of felt, could you talk about the initial phase, because I when and Bakisha, you can like ask questions too, okay? So the love bombing or whatever you want to call it was insane. Like it felt like a fairy tale I have never felt before. I think that crossed even like an NPD sort of honeymoon stage that I felt with the borderline, and it felt very real. That's something I would love for you to touch upon.
The love bombing stage, all of that sort of thing. Well, we get I'm of the opinion that sort of when it comes to love bombing to the start of new relationships, I think we all do that naturally to a certain extent.
Absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
know, when you think about the happiest, healthiest of people, when you go on a first date with somebody, you dress up nice, you go somewhere nice, you make sure you're nice and clean, all of the things, the steps that you take on a first date.
Yeah.
But we all know that the truth is, see me looking scruffy, unshaven, eating pizza off my tummy in my underpants. That's the truth. But I'm not bringing that to the first date. And we all go through this process of revealing a little bit more of ourselves in this relationship until we eventually get to the true, this is what I am. I burp, I fart, I don't sleep properly, I grumble at this thing, all of this that we don't mention. And so I think it's, in essence, this concept of love bombing is it's a normal thing to a certain extent. But I think with regards to BPD, the reason I think we have a couple of things that go on in the start of a new relationship. I mean, first of all, I mean, someone's mentioned favorite person.
No.
Uh, that definitely becomes a thing. And until sort of my current relationship, I would say that everyone I've been in a romantic relationship in my adult life has been my favorite person at the time.
Mhm.
And so when we meet a new person, we aren't just meeting someone we like, we're meeting the greatest person who has ever walked the earth. We're meeting someone that we are so in love with, it's unbelievable, because they're perfect, they're wonderful, they're amazing, and they're all these things our favorite person is. And so we fall in love so
Mhm.
heavily and so deeply and so quickly.
Mhm.
And then we start to build up this romantic obsession with this person. You know,
Yeah.
we just be, they are so amazing to us.
Mhm.
And we sort of end up projecting our own idea of what we want in an ideal partner onto this person,
Mhm.
and we start imagining that they are this
Right.
ideal partner that we've dreamt of our entire lives.
Mhm.
And of course nobody is that perfect partner, and nobody is that person that you've been dreaming of your entire life.
Mhm.
And so eventually something will happen that proves that. They will, you'll have that first argument, or you'll find out that first thing they do that actually does irritate you a bit, even, and it becomes this weird situation where part of you is trying to say, no, they're perfect, they're amazing, they're wonderful.
Mhm.
And then this other part is saying, but are they though?
Okay.
And so we go from this period of being so in love with this wonderful, perfect human
Mhm.
to starting to doubt them, to doubt ourselves, to start doubting our own judgment.
Mhm.
And, like if I think this of her and she did this, then I could be wrong about everybody, and so on and so on.
Mhm.
Um, and so we move out of this initial period of being massively in love with someone and into this sort of realistic period where I think you either manage to ground yourself and keep yourself in that relationship and realize that that person isn't perfect, because they're only human after all, nobody's perfect.
Mhm.
Or it can be the sort of thing that causes a full-on split where you realize, actually, not only are they not perfect, they're awful, they're terrible. How did I end up with this person? What the hell is going on? And you leave.
Uh,
And and this is how, this is why things like uh, uh unstable relationships is a common marker of BPD, because we do all this stuff.
mhm.
But yeah, we do go through this initial sort of deep, intense love of a new person.
Mhm.
We tend to fall in love very quickly and very heavily.
Mhm. I it's it's just so fascinating to me because there have been many a times where I have been like, do I have BPD? And I don't resonate with most things weirdly, but sometimes I'm like, oh fuck yeah, I have felt that. I have felt that. But then
Mhm.
With I haven't felt like splitting before. I haven't felt a lot of um um the obsession though, definitely on my behalf as well, is something that I definitely feel like. So I might not have borderline literally, but I totally resonate with the whole thing where it feels like, okay, this
Yeah.
person is the ideal, like the fantasy just does not ever end, at least in my head for some reason. When does that fantasy fall for you? Does that ever happen? Or do you think it's in your head, or is it actually because of your partner?
I think the fantasy is in our own head.
Mm-hmm.
I think we do have this idealized fictional partner that we concoct. We have this idealized fictional relationship that we put together. And I think for me, it's sort of, I sort of figured out it's, you, we do a lot of personality absorption. We do a lot of getting our wants and desires from outside sources and that sort of thing. And I realized, a lot of mine is driven by sort of television, by movies, by these sort of idealized relationships that we see on TV, that sort of thing. And of course, they're fiction. Nobody's relationship is like that at all.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it builds you up for massive disappointment. The best advice I was ever given on that,
Uh-huh.
after talking to a friend of mine, Dr. Ruth Harper, when she said, someone had said to her, you should ideally be looking for someone you think is sort of a 7 out of 10,
Okay.
because if you think they're any more than that, you're
Oh,
wrong.
good. Yeah.
Nobody is a 10. Nobody is, like, no one is that perfect. And if you found someone that you think is a perfect 10, no, because they're not. They might be very nice, they might be great, but going for that person that you think, well, I really like them, but this thing's driving me nuts. But okay, I can live with that. That's the sort of thing that you sort of looking for, I think, in a relationship,
Okay.
because it's much healthier, it's much more realistic, it's a real thing.
Okay. I totally like. I think I had. Okay, I'll tell you something. I think I saw this one video of yours where you said it was a car, right? That you put like emotions for like a car, or like a you posted like a photo of a car on your Instagram, I remember.
Oh yes, my car recently.
And I
Yeah.
resonated so much with that because since I was a kid, have been like personifying every little thing. My teddy bear, everyone, they all have a name, they all have a personality of their own. So
Mhm.
I would love for you to touch that topic.
Yeah, I mean, to fill out that story, what all that happened was my car reached the end of its useful life.
Oh.
It's an object, it's a possession, it's a piece of mechanical engineering that broke. And this happens every day to thousands of cars across the world. They break, we go and buy a new car. This is what happens.
Uh-huh.
But when we have this habit, we anthropomorphize things, we personify, we give them personalities, we give them names, we feel things about it. And it reached a point where I'm sort of, where I recently I got scrapped the old car.
Okay.
And on the drive to get rid of it felt like I was taking my dog to the vet to be put down. It was this heartbreaking, like I'm saying goodbye to my car, and it's done so much, like it's put in effort and has done things for me and that kind of thing, without real, like, look, this is no more a thing than any other object I own. This is a tool, this is a lump of metal. It doesn't know me, I don't know it, and it's broken, throw it away. um and it becomes a difficult, sad, weird thing to go through, you know um and yeah, there's a little bit of guilt when you like walk away from the scrapyard and I'm leaving my car behind, and I shouldn't be doing that. What? And you imagine it's crying in some way, it's saying, please don't leave me, I'll keep running or whatever. And it's, no, and I don't know what it is that makes us do that, but as you'll have seen when I posted that on Instagram, there were a few people like, what's the name of the car? Come on, you've given it a name. What's the name of the car? And that sort of thing. So
Yeah, did you?
it's say again.
Did you?
Did I have a name for the car? The name the car was called Mitzi. The
Oh
car was called Mitzi because she was a Mitsubishi, and
my
so
God.
it was that's it. I haven't named the new car yet. I'm going
Oh,
to try and hold. I'm going to hold off on doing that because it's a car. It
is
doesn't
it?
need a name, and I have to remember that.
Oh God, I think that could be. So is hyper attachment a BPD trait?
Is the I don't know. I don't know if it's a BPD thing, but it certainly affects me.
Okay, because it affects me too. I definitely resonate with that. But Vagisha, why didn't you like leave it at? Do you do that as well? I've actually seen this in a lot of people with BPD as well who get attached to things that are not real.
Mm. And of course, it's not just cars, like you say. It's everything. You
Mhm.
know, I have the same feelings about my childhood teddy bear and everything else. And I think it's that the reason why I would label it a BPD thing is because I think it comes from that abundance of empathy that we'll go as far as to apply it to things that we couldn't possibly have empathy for.
Mhm.
And so we'll feel bad about that inanimate object or that possession or whatever because we want things to have feelings
Mhm.
because we have so many of them ourselves. I think that it's sort of weird to us that there's something that doesn't have feelings, right? That's an odd thing, but of course it's really only people and animals.
Oh, so we always like to believe that, but I don't know. I think sometimes delusion. Oh, I think it also rises from a place of assuming that everyone feels the same way. Oh yeah. Oh. Okay, I'm
Yeah,
beginning to like resonate a little too much.
yeah, no, that feels about right. I think that's something that we do a lot in cluster B. You know, we assume that people feel the way we do. Um, and you know, to push that to objects makes
Okay.
sense to me. It absolutely does. You know, this is one of the common things that the common problems that we face in cluster B, and this goes across them all,
Mhm,
is that we assume people are feeling like we do.
mhm.
um and I, to be honest, I see this come up a lot more in the narcissism side of things
Okay.
because it makes you much more untrusting of people. You're ready for them to do that bad thing because you're thinking, well, I would do that bad thing,
Oh.
so I'm expecting you to do it. And so you do get that thing where because you think everyone feels like we do,
Mhm.
you assume everyone out there is working as if they have borderline personality disorder, which of course is far from the truth. But it's a very common thing that we do, I think. Very common.
Okay, that's interesting. So, could you touch upon the manipulative side of that? Because I'm very intrigued by the manipulative thing you said. Do you think it's
Uh
any manipulative? Also, I don't think like it's in like I am gonna manipulate somebody, but like yeah,
no,
I
it's not.
think
It's
it's something.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's never as malicious as that we're thinking, oh, I'm gonna manipulate this person today.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's I made a video about this a TikTok about this that half my audience seemed to agree with me and the other half thought I was being ridiculous when I said people with BPD are manipulative.
Mhm.
um because obviously the honor of being manipulative goes to the narcissist, right? They're the ones that are out there manipulating people, and it's not true at all. I think that on the BPD side of things, we are manipulative because what we're trying to do is maintain our status quo in life. We're trying to keep people where we want them to be in the relationships we want them to be in, acting and behaving the way we want the world to be. And when it looks like that's going to change, we do something to stop it happening. So, you know, very simply, when you look at sort of the fear of abandonment stuff, that's an area where people with BPD are extremely manipulative.
Okay.
That when you look at the lengths we'll go to stop a friend from seeing other friends or leaving us behind or anything like that. You know, we'll throw tantrums, we'll rage, we'll change our personality to be somebody that someone else might like more, so they won't go away if they like us more, and that kind of thing.
Mm.
And it all comes from this, as I said right at the beginning, it's all coming from that same place of fear
Mm.
and past trauma. And so I think to a certain extent, all of the personality disorders are manipulative. You
Okay.
know, it's
And
I think the stereotypical narcissism thing takes a lot of the heat, but it's no way is it the only one. And exactly like you say, it's not malicious, it's
mhm,
defensive. It's a please don't leave me
mhm,
kind of thing. It's not that I'm directly looking for someone I can control or
mhm,
take charge of. I'm looking for someone to stick around
mhm.
and look after me and support me and do all those things, that whatever it is we get from a favorite person or something like that.
Okay, I mean, I do find that really okay. Okay, yeah, I've had like a first-hand experience with someone with borderline, where okay, so I am not like an avoidant, nor am I clingy. I'm pretty secure like that with my relationships. And I kind of got a little bit of like, okay, the clinginess, I understood. Okay, it was borderline, I understand that. But it got to the point where there was like no breathing space. Like it has to be like
Mm-hmm.
10 hours of communication. I'm like, that's not humanly possible to keep up, like if it's supposed to be like a consistent, like forever thing, that's not like humanly possible to keep up with. So I was like, okay, but it sounds all right, but like, is this sustainable? Because it doesn't seem sustainable, right? So if you want a healthy relationship, I think the pushing away, I think that's probably a BPD thing, right? To like push your partner to like a really um extreme.
Yeah, yeah. And again, we don't mean to,
Hmm.
and we don't want to
Uh-huh.
necessarily. And it does come from absolute fear on our part.
Okay.
You know, we are terrified of that being abandoned, of someone leaving us and being left to our own devices without that care and that support that we need.
Mhm.
And it can really make us uh push people to the limit. You
Mhm.
know, as you're saying, you know, someone wanting communication constantly, that reinforcement, and to a certain extent that can be okay, but then it starts infringing on your life and the way you're able to live, and suddenly we're pulling you into our mess with us, and that's no good for you. That's no good for anybody.
Mhm.
And as you say, it's not sustainable, it doesn't scale, it's going to go wrong eventually.
Mhm.
Because unless you find somebody else with BPD who is as obsessed over you as you are with them, then and that's not going to be healthy, by the way, either. So, you know, inevitably anyone you're in a relationship with is going to want to do things, have a life, and that sort of thing. Um, and I'm of the belief that the best way around that for
Mhm.
the person with BPD is to get your own life, to be doing your own things independently. Again, that's what worked for me.
Mhm.
And it's moving that relationship from getting to the stage where, rather than saying I need somebody, I need them in my life, I don't know what I'd do without them, to
Mhm.
being like, I would be very sad if you weren't here, but my life would carry on, and I've got
Yeah.
stuff to do, and I've got friends, and I'm busy, and that sort of thing. You know, that's a much more healthy relationship to be in, because you shouldn't depend on your partner to that extent. You know, they aren't, your partner isn't there to parent you. And a lot of us, that's what we want, which is, you know, that's no good and becomes increasingly stressful the older you get, and that sort of thing. um and that's, you know, that leads us into sort of the age regression part of BPD, where we can act very, not childish, but very immature.
Mhm.
I think, you know, where we want to be parented, we want somebody to look after us and make decisions for us, and just take care of everything for us.
Mhm.
um and I think that comes from sort of childhood. You
Mhm.
know, we have trouble deciding our own things. Our parents decide them for us and that sort of thing. And we want that comfort and
Mhm.
that security that we get from parents
Yeah.
to continue into adulthood. Because I think taking over from your parents to look after yourself and be entirely responsible for yourself
Yeah.
can be a terrifying thing, especially if you're someone with a lot of mental health difficulties and trouble doing stuff and trouble getting your life on order, in on track and in order and that
Mhm.
sort of thing. Then this idea of, no, you're an adult now, good luck, it is terrifying. We can screw that up massively, and a lot of us do. I have.
Okay.
um and so yeah, that's where it all comes from, I think.
It's actually, it feels exhausting even like to hear because I feel like if your mind is everywhere else, like this starts, I mean, becoming empty because you're pouring so much into so much. It starts feeling a little empty here. And
Yeah.
actually, which reminds me, one of our members actually wanted me to ask you a question. Um, could you touch upon the rumination and obsession?
Yes.
And like,
Rumination,
how are you
obsession.
coping? Because so she just like came out of rehab or something, and she tends to get episodes because she's feels empty and she gets obsessed with somebody and it takes over like too much of her head. So could you touch upon that?
Yeah, I mean, this feeling of emptiness that we all have, or that a lot of us have, I
Mm.
guess. um when you get into this state where you feel like nothing makes you feel good, nothing is satisfying, nothing makes you happy, nothing brings you emotion. um and so we start to get that from other places, and we can become very obsessed over things as a
Mm-hmm.
result of that, because it's just we're pouring water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom,
Hmm.
and no matter how fast you fill it up, the water's just flowing right through.
Right.
And yet we take comfort in things that we can become obsessed over.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be people, it can be hobbies, it can be all kinds of things. Something that I've done a lot of, and I know my audience have told me they've done a lot of, is we develop these obsessions with hobbies a lot, and we'll become the person who is just into whatever this thing is, and this thing becomes our entire personality, and we're always talking about this and we're always doing this, and it becomes a very comforting thing. It's a thing that we can control, that we can put in order and deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while it sort of looks like it's going to fill up that bucket,
Mm-hmm.
uh until the day that it just doesn't anymore. you know um there are so many hobbies over the years that I've started, and you get obsessed with, and you buy all the equipment for it, and you spend thousands of pounds on doing this hobby, until one day you just, I don't want to do that anymore, and it switches off like a light immediately, and you're left with piles of stuff that you've now got to get rid of, because you were obsessed with this hobby for a while. um and it's frustrating. It really is. But I think, yeah, more often than not, you find that people with BPD have a long list of hobbies that they've had over the years. And it will, wide ranging things like, oh, I was into mountain climbing and then I stopped and I got into watercolor painting. And okay, but it's the same thing. And then I went out and I bought the easel and all the paints and all the brushes and all of that. And I did that for 6 months. And then I woke up one day and watercolor painting was awful. And now I do tap dancing. And you thought, okay, great. And we all do the same thing, you know. Um, but I found those things to be fairly temporary in life. And we do have things that stay with us forever, and I try and focus on those things, those interests, because they seem the most fulfilling and the
Mhm.
most real. I mean, my personal example would be sort of play music. I've played musical instruments since sort of being 5, 6 years old,
Oh, that's
and
nice.
that has never left me. That has never gone away. I love playing music. I've always loved playing music,
I don't love that.
but it does get from time to time masked and hidden by something else that I'll become obsessed with for a little while. And then you eventually realize, oh yeah, I remember I used to play bass a lot. That was great fun. And you'll pick it up again. And so I try and focus on those ones because, like I say, they're more real. They're more a thing that I definitely do like,
Hmm.
as opposed to all these other things that are just a little fleeting obsession for a while.
Yeah, okay. I love that. I was just thinking that Vagisha, that sounds so much like ADHD. I was that sounds so much like ADHD where like you start something and then you leave something and you start a new hobby again and then you leave
Yeah,
again.
yeah. The only and I look, this is where I run into difficulty sort of differentiating personally
Okay.
between what is a BPD thing, what is an ADHD thing, that sort of thing. And the way it feels to me is the ADHD stuff is far quicker than the
Okay.
BPD stuff. Um, and so yeah, there's the not finishing tasks is very much part of ADHD, but
Hmm.
I'll do that 10, 20 times a day. You
Yeah.
know, that will happen all the time. You
Mhm.
know, I don't finish anything that I start. You know, every job is a bit of another job that I've already started.
Mhm.
Whereas with the BPD thing, it seems to come in much slower, longer cycles.
Okay.
Um, and so, you know, yeah, I'll start hobbies that I do drop, but day to day, I'll be able to finish things with that and deal with that because I'm obsessed over it, right? You know, it's you know, I'm reminded of when I first got into into vaping, and
Mhm.
I bought all the equipment and all of the and I'd sit there of an evening and take it all apart and clean it all and polish it all and put it back together and rearrange it on the shelf and make it all look nice and that sort of thing. And it's because that was a thing I could control.
Mhm.
And so I could fit, you know, from an ADHD point of view, I could finish those tests. I could finish cleaning things, putting them back together, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
But the over a longer period of time, the obsession itself fades away to nothing.
Okay, that's okay. So do you ever go back to your hobbies? So, is it like drop it away? Once you drop it, drop it.
No, no,
Then go.
it is the difference between these ones that have been lifelong and the ones that are the flash in the pan. The quick ones, no, I never go back to.
Never go back.
I what once I'm done with them, I'm done with them. That's it. You know, I had a year where I obsessively built lots of model planes.
Mhm.
I was totally into that. You know, once again, you spend all the money on the equipment, you buy all the models, you buy all the paints, all the airbrushes, that sort of thing. And then one day I didn't feel it and I stopped. And I seriously doubt I will ever build another model plane ever again. That's it's just never going to happen. And you know, that was years ago. And you give all the stuff away to someone who might use it or whatever, or you just throw it out. And I'm never going to go back to that. And there have, you know, there have been many of those things over the years that it's that classic black and white thinking that we do. Everything is either really, really good or really, really bad.
Mhm.
And so it's what we do is you wake up that day and you've split on that hobby. You don't, it's not really, really good anymore. It's really, really bad. And it's a chore and it's boring and it's annoying and irritating. And so once I've reached that point, I don't go back to it. And so the ones that I do go back to, they're those longer lasting real ones
Oh.
that actually do help. And they never sort of leave me suddenly. They get drowned out by these new things that come along, and
Mhm.
then that new thing will leave, and then the volume gets turned back up on the things that I was happy with all along.
Mhm. Okay, that's very interesting. Um, a few particular things I wanted to touch upon. A
Mhm.
controversial thing. Actually, I heard in one of my psychology classes a while back was, do you think someone with BPD could maintain a healthy relationship? I mean,
Yeah.
to a certain extent they can, but with something I've noticed is the constant need for chaos. So like, how do you go about that?
I wouldn't say I have a constant need for chaos at all.
Okay. So can
Um,
you deal with completely like peace in the relationship? Because every time I've seen that happen, it becomes like the relationship is like peaceful, but the person with borderline has is now an alcoholic or some kind of addiction that develops
yeah, I
in a
mean,
job.
right. So there's a lot going on there, really. I think when when we're untreated, when we've not had therapy, and we're just in a lot of emotional pain,
Mhm,
we're forever looking for something to deal with that pain.
mhm,
And so things like various substance abuses, that kind of thing, are a very common thing.
correct.
And it's not necessarily anything to do with our relationship with the other person. It's this inner pain that we're constantly feeling.
Mhm,
And we find a way to dull it, to make it less painful. A lot of people find alcohol because it's readily available. It's right there. If you want to go out and drink, you can go out and drink.
mhm,
And it's, these things then become their own problem, that a lot of the things we choose to sort of uh pacify ourselves with become harmful in their own right. You can become an alcoholic.
mhm,
So we might start out drinking to sort of feel better at first, but
correct.
then eventually, before you know it, you're drinking because you need to drink,
Mhm,
uh, which is an entirely different thing. And then you're dealing with an alcohol problem as well as BPD.
mhm,
But these things they're a crutch. They're just there to help us along with the inner pain that we feel.
right.
And so I truly think, like, whatever the problem is that we're facing day to day, whether that's alcohol or drugs or anything else,
Mhm,
they are impossible to deal with until we deal with this pain that's causing us to need to do that in the first place.
mhm,
And so you constantly see people with BPD or other mental health problems saying, I'm trying to give up smoking and I keep failing. And well, it's because that's helping you. It's actually helping you, and you're not fixing the thing that it's helping you with. So all you're doing is trying to hobble along with a broken leg and throw your crutch away and go, well, I should be able to walk now. Well, no, your leg is still broken and you've thrown the crutch away. So now you're actually in a bit more bother. You need to heal the leg and then you can throw the crutch away.
mhm,
But of course, depending on what you're using as a crutch, that might be a more or less urgent thing to deal with, you
mhm.
know.
Okay. I How do you think, or maybe if you have ever managed to do that, like able to cope with the pain and the emptiness? Like, has there been a period where you haven't felt that and you actually felt free? If that makes any sense, if I'm framing it right, has
Yeah,
that been any
I
temporary period
I
where you felt free?
I think post therapy,
You think?
therapy helped immensely. Just more than I can put into words. It saved my life. I wouldn't be here talking to you if I'd not got into that therapy group. Um, and since then, it's sort of given me the ability to deal with these things,
Mhm,
and practical, real life ways of making these things feel better.
mhm.
And so I don't have those feelings of emptiness anymore.
Okay.
They just don't come anymore, and I do feel free of that. And a big part of that was about, as I said before, about dealing with the obsession and the favorite people. It's about getting your own life. It's about giving yourself something to focus on, something to care about, giving yourself a personality, all this stuff. That is just key in all of it.
Mhm.
um Telling somebody to work on themselves is a bit of a cliche,
Correct.
but it's essential.
Mhm,
It's the base foundation to me of healing from BPD.
mhm,
You need to be a person in your own right. You need to be an independent, busy, active person living your life to the fullest.
mhm.
um which is not easy at first.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like, just go out, do things. That's easily said. It's a more difficult thing to do and can take time. But it was that sort of getting out of therapy and beginning to sort of work on myself as an independent person, not rely on somebody for emotional support, for validation, for being proud of who I am as a person and what I do and enjoying what I do and owning it. And you reach a point where you sort of you don't have time to be down or
Okay.
feel empty. You don't have that moment in your life where you think nothing's good and nothing's worth it and that sort of thing, because you eventually reach a point where you're constantly bombarded with proof to the contrary that life is full, life is worth living. There are people who care about you. There are things you can do that make you happy.
Okay.
And the more you do those things, the more obvious and easy it becomes. And as I sit here now, the idea of feeling empty and, all of that, it's a distant memory to me now.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm really glad. But
Thank you. Yeah.
I the part where you spoke about like you want to keep going, I have seen, I think practically every person will be really have problems with self-harm and wanting to kill themselves. So could you have any advice for people who have attempted it?
Um, right.
Mm-hmm.
I was there too. I
Okay.
I had immense suicidal ideation. And it sort of peaked just before I got into therapy.
Okay.
And the now then, it's a big thing. And I can't, what's the right way of putting this? Giving a sort of blanket advice that covers everybody is a difficult thing to do. However,
Mm-hmm.
the realization that helped me almost immediately with that was that I didn't want to die. I
Oh,
didn't want to be dead. That wasn't what I wanted. That wasn't what the suicidal ideation was about. The suicidal ideation for me was about not wanting to be in pain anymore.
okay.
I
So
was,
that was the way
you
out.
know, and that was, yeah, that was the way out. There was at the time no help coming. I was constantly being told I was depressed, etc., which was doing nothing. And it felt like I was just always going to be in pain and that no one cared, no one could do anything. And the only way it was ever going to end is if I jumped off the top of that tall building. And as soon as I realized that I didn't want to die, I wanted to live. I wanted, it was my problem was that I was in pain. Then that wanting, that suicidal ideation turned off almost immediately when help started to come, because I just wanted to feel better. So when I was shown an alternative way, and even when you look, this can take a few years. You're going to be in therapy for a while. You aren't going to feel better tomorrow, but you will feel better one day. You don't have to live the rest of your life like this. Then, okay, I was up for that. I was there for that. Just if there's a better way of dealing with this than me jumping off a big thing, great, let's do that. I would much rather do that. And now I'm at the point where, God, I am very fearful of death and causing myself harm. I really, really, really
Very sad.
cannot stress this enough. Do not want to die in the slightest. And so, yeah, it's funny how you can move from one extreme
Mm-hmm.
right to the other to realize, no, I've got a life to live now. I'm busy. I've got goals. I've got stuff I want to do. I've got things I want to achieve,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm getting on with that. So this idea of suicide now is ridiculous to me.
That's amazing.
But yeah, but there was absolutely a time when it felt like the only answer. And it was, that was probably the most destructive thing to my relationship at that time.
Oh, okay.
When you look at it from the point of view of a partner who is with somebody with very outspoken, obvious suicidal ideation. I never hid it, you know. There's only so many times you can be brought home by the police because they've found you somewhere before you have to say, look, I have a problem here. um and it was eventually that sort of pushed me into to doing, to seeking out the therapy, because that is a very obviously wrong feeling. You shouldn't feel like that. That's unhealthy.
Mhm.
uh and so, when you are feeling like that, it's very obvious there's a problem, and
Mhm.
it needs fixing, it needs therapy, it needs whatever is appropriate for you. uh and so, the interesting thing is that, if I say pure NPD, I could have gone on indefinitely just convincing myself that I was great and the world was perfect, and it wasn't me that had the problem, it was everybody else, and that sort of thing. But because of the BPD side of things, that got me to continue to seek help.
Okay. I'm really happy for you. Oh my God. That's amazing. Um, oh good. I think that gives hope for a lot of people because um I controversially okay, do you think people with BPD and LPD can change?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, no question about it.
Okay.
This is not a lifelong condition. This is not something that you have to put up with
So glad you said
forever.
that. Mm-hmm.
You can get help. There is help. And you can live a normal life, you can have healthy relationships, you can be the person that you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
um I think for a lot of people it does require help. I think there are far too many people in the world who are having to struggle through it alone or without the proper help.
Mm-hmm.
But that help it is there, it does exist, it can happen.
Mm-hmm.
um and obviously, people's opportunity to get that help varies country to country, place to place, all of that sort of thing. But yeah, there's no reason why you have to live the rest of your life feeling like this. we
Mm-hmm.
we absolutely can change, we can deal with this, because it's all coming from fear, it's all coming from trauma, and if we can face those fears and that trauma and deal with those things,
Mm-hmm.
then we don't need these other coping mechanisms that we've
Correct.
developed. We have no further use for it, and it fades into the background, it goes away. So yeah, nobody should ever give up hope with this, ever. you
At
you
all.
absolutely can be fixed. And I don't know what personally you will have to go through. There's a lot of help out there on the internet, on YouTube, on various platforms. But I'm still of the belief there's no substitute for seeing a therapist and going
Oh
to
yeah.
therapy and
Sure.
that sort of thing, of course. But yeah, I would hate to think that there's anyone who thinks that they're stuck the way they are, because that's so not true. You can all get better.
Absolutely. I think, to a lot of extent, very large extent, you need self-awareness because I think if you're a bit oblivious and it's like, okay, I want to change, because I've seen this happen when they're like, okay, I want to change. There is that temporary change, and 3 months later, it's gone back to exactly what it was before. So there is not a active like change. It's sort of a temporary fix, which is not exactly a fix. And I would like to believe
Mm.
that anyone can change. And this is a very controversial thing that I get canceled for saying, but I think everything is a coping mechanism, in the end. Um, when we think about like personality disorders and everything, it's a coping mechanism. So
Mm.
if there is any way to undo all of that, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with you to a certain extent. It is very much like that, and we just absolutely can change.
Mhm.
It's and I think one of the great ironies of cluster B personality disorders is that they each in their own way have a thing that convinces you can't change.
Okay.
So with borderline, I think you will get a lot of people who have that initial spark, like as you say, they'll do the thing and they'll start making the changes, and then your BPD kicks in and it starts whispering like, you can't really do this, you're not deserving of this, you can't manage, you might as well give up, you're not going to be one of the ones that makes it, and you have this voice in the back of your head the whole time.
Mhm.
And it takes a lot of strength to tell that voice to shut the hell up,
Mhm.
and it takes several attempts to do that.
Absolutely.
um and so what I like to see in people is when they have that, you can see that little spark of fire inside them that is saying, I want to get better, I want to do something about this. And everyone who has that, I think can and will get better,
Ab-
because they're on a journey, they're on this quest, they're gonna do it, you know but BPD will drag you back down as much as it can. It's, if I didn't know better, I'd say it was almost like a parasite feeding off you in
Yeah.
some way emotionally. It's like it wants you to be low. It wants you to feel sad, because if you don't, it's gone. It's like the minute you start trying to fix, the BPD starts hanging on for dear life and trying to stop the fix. But you can fight through that. You
Mhm.
just have to tell it no.
I think that's okay. That's beautiful. I think there's something about like being attached to pain. It sounds a lot like being attached to pain. Um,
Yeah.
if
Yeah,
I'm
we do that a lot.
yeah,
We
like
do that a lot.
letting
And
go of the pain.
I feel like that gets worse the older you get,
Mhm.
because I think you've had more time being used to pain.
Okay, yeah.
You
So
know, it's still, there's a lot of things that are still new for me. I'm 44 years old, and there are still things where I'm like, I'm not in pain anymore. Hey, that's great. That should have upset me, and it didn't. And I'm still learning this life without that constant fear and worry and pain in it. Um, and it's because, I've had like 40 plus years of feeling awful.
mhm.
So everything different is weird. But yeah, it absolutely can happen without question.
Oh God, yeah, that sounds okay. I just have to tell you one more thing though. I mean, ask you one more thing. What would your advice be for a person who is in a relationship with borderline person? And suppose, and when is that fine line where you're like, okay, will my partner change or not? I think this is where the thing comes into question, because if they're not changing, but they don't want you to leave, how do
Yeah.
you break up with a borderline person is in
Yeah.
in a way where it doesn't feel like abandonment, but at the same time, I mean, it's not like you can't ever not break up with someone if it doesn't work out, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
Now, the sort of how do I support someone with BPD, is that's something I get asked a lot.
Hmm.
And it breaks down into two parts. You
Mhm.
have, first of all, the best way to support somebody with what they're going through is to talk to them and ask them what they need.
Mhm.
um you know as we've said, everyone experiences it differently. So what might comfort me, what might help me, might not help anybody else, or it might help everybody else. So the best thing you can do is ask your partner, when this is happening, what would you like me to do? What so I made a video a while ago where I said, when your person is having an episode, give them space. And some people went, yeah, that's exactly, thank you, I need space. And then other people said, no, no, don't give me space, come closer, hold on to me, don't, whatever. And you think, right, okay, there's nothing that works for everyone.
Mhm.
uh and so there's communication in that relationship is key.
Okay.
uh and so that's the first part of it. The other part of it is about protecting you as the person without BPD,
Mhm.
because to a certain extent, as long as we're getting away with behaving like we
Mhm.
aren't going to change,
Correct.
because why would we? It's working for us,
Mhm.
we're comfortable,
You're
so why would we change?
Mhm.
And that that will make us put our partners through hell.
Mhm.
And so it's down to our partners to have that boundary in place, to be able to say what they will and will not put up with. And it's easy, it's another one of those easier said than done things, but to be able to say, you've crossed my boundary, this is now damaging me and I need to go.
Mhm.
is a very difficult thing. And the person with BPD will kick and scream and tantrum and rage and employ all of the tricks that they've learned to get you to stay, and all of that sort of thing. And having the strength to say, I can't anymore,
Mm-hmm.
to say, I have to go and you need to fix,
Mm-hmm.
is a very difficult thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's essential for the more neurotypical healthy person to
Mm-hmm.
remain the more neurotypical healthy person. Like, we will drive you nuts, we'll drag you down with us if you let us, so don't let us,
Okay,
is
it's so
the
sad
thing.
even to like hear about it honestly because it sucks for like either parties honestly. Uh, that's yeah, but like I have now I don't know if this is a BPD thing or if this crosses that part where it could even be like malignancy, but I have seen unaliving threats as well. Like if you leave me, I'll kill myself. It's been something else.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And it's threats, it's noise, it's you reach a point where we aren't your responsibility. It's not your responsibility to change us, to heal us, to make us better. You might love us, and it might be heartbreaking that we aren't changing
mhm,
or that we're struggling with it. But at the end of the day, that's not you. You aren't required to go through this hell with us. And
mhm,
I don't think it makes anyone a bad person for not wanting to go through that hell with us.
mhm,
And in all honesty, if someone would say to me, if you leave me, I'll kill myself, my response would be, well, good luck with that. Goodbye.
mhm. I mean,
You
it's
know,
a healthy way to go about it. How else do you navigate something like that? I mean, uh,
I think that's it. That's the way, and it's difficult and it's painful and it's heartbreaking. But I think that as the person without BPD, you need to be seeing us make efforts, make progress, uh being in a relationship with someone with untreated, undiagnosed BPD is very different to being in a relationship with someone who is in therapy, who is doing the work, who is getting better day by day, that sort of thing.
mhm,
That's that is what I would want to see, I
mhm,
think, you
mhm,
know. And of course, the way that a person's BPD plays out in their day-to-day life is unique to that individual. So it might be something you can live with quite happily.
mhm,
It might be something that causes you all the stress in the world, and only that. I can't advise on that as to what people should tolerate and what they shouldn't. But I think having that healthy boundary in place so that you can say, right, he's gone too far this time.
mhm,
I can't live like this. I need to go.
mhm.
I think it takes a lot of maturity and strength. It really does, and it's not easy. But I do think it's the way to go with things. And in terms of telling us things in a way that won't upset us,
Mhm.
I most things do. I mean, don't worry about that so much, I
Mhm.
would say.
Oh, really? Okay. I mean, yeah, I mean, but would there be anything besides? Okay, actually, yeah, there's nothing you can do. Is there any way you deal with splitting? Like, is there any way you deal like and tell yourself, okay, I'm splitting, or like cognitively telling yourself, this is black and white, I'm not thinking straight.
Yeah,
Does that happen?
yeah. Happens a lot. I
Mhm.
mean, I still split on things
Okay.
quite often.
Hmm.
The only difference is now I'm very aware when I'm doing it.
Oh, okay.
And what I don't do
Hmm.
is sort of burn the world down like I used to.
Okay.
So my big saying on my channel is do it tomorrow, right? This thing that you're feeling that you need to act on. This really, when we split, when, for example, if I have a friend who I've suddenly gone from thinking they're the greatest person in the world to thinking they're scum,
Hmm.
I don't have to do anything about that,
Yep.
right? There is an urge there to do something, to
Mhm.
block somebody, to send them messages of abuse, to tell them exactly what I think is wrong with them, all of that stuff. There's great temptation there to do that. But I've learned now that if I do that, tomorrow I'm going to feel very differently. I'm going to feel like an idiot, and I'm going to owe somebody a massive apology, and I need to unblock things and delete Facebook posts and all of that stuff. And so my advice is, whatever you feel in the moment like you must do it tomorrow instead, because tomorrow if you probably are going to feel differently.
Mhm.
If you're not, if you don't, then maybe you're right. You know, we're not wrong all the time. Some people are bad. Sometimes we do need to cut people out of our lives. Sometimes we are hurt by other people and we need to do something about that.
Mhm.
But if that's the case, it will still be the case tomorrow.
Mhm.
And you can do something about it then, when you're a bit more sure that you're not acting out of some rash behavior, some quick thought that you've had. You need that time. And so when it comes to splitting,
Mhm.
whatever you're going to do it later.
Mhm.
Just for now, go home, sit, watch the TV, chill out, just don't do anything. And
Mhm.
I think it can be difficult to get hold of, especially if you're angry at somebody and you just want to call them and shout at them, or whatever. That is so hard to get a hold of.
Okay.
But if you can do that, it will reduce the amount of disruption you caused in your life so
Uh,
much. It's such a key thing to be able to do. But again, that only happens if you know you're doing it, if you are
mm.
that level of self-aware.
Yeah, once again,
uh
I think self-awareness is the key to change. I think without that, that's the first primary step. So, how do you think people can develop self-awareness, especially like someone with a personality disorder? Or do you think that just comes naturally over time? At some point, you just like hit your break, and I'm like, okay, things are not working out.
I think it comes naturally over time. For me, it came in therapy, and it
Okay.
came with sort of it came with examining my behaviors and asking the question, why am I doing that?
Mhm.
That's a very important question to ask yourself. Like, where is this feeling coming from? Why am I wanting to react in this way? And if you follow, you sort of learn that if you follow this chain back far enough,
Mhm.
maybe I'm angry at this guy today
Mhm.
because I'm actually angry at this thing that happened when I was 6 at school and
Okay.
has stayed with me my entire life. And you start, once you start realizing these things, where this pain comes from, then dealing with it in your day-to-day present life becomes silly. It becomes ridiculous to lose your temper with somebody because really you're angry at that thing your dad said once, or something like that. It fades away.
Mhm.
um that was very a recurring theme for me throughout therapy, that the more I learned about my own motivations,
Mhm.
the more the way they played out just faded away. There was no sort of, today I'm not going to split again, or anything like that, but it faded away, and now it happens significantly less frequently than it used to. And that has been true for all of the different symptoms to do with BPD.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay. It's just so nice to see. Like, it gives so much hope. Like, when you're one of the few people that I've seen with BPD that's like, I can see like change. And um, I just thank you so much for doing what you do. I mean, I remember around a year ago, um, I didn't know how to help a friend with BPD, and I started researching it, and I came across your channel, and I was like, listen, I don't know what I can do. Watch it should. That's all I can do. That's all I can do. And I just want to say thank you so much for doing that. And I just had one last question before we end the interview. Um, okay, let's say someone has a very high level of borderline. Okay, I'm not talking about a more manageable sort of borderline. Do you
Mhm.
think medication is the right way to go, because I remember this was not someone I know directly, a friend's friend. Um, the medication was at the highest, like the peak it could possibly be, and it almost felt like she had reached a level of insanity. And
Mhm.
I was like, and I've seen a lot of people using medication to kill themselves or acting a little different after they've been on medication. So, do you think therapy is the only way to go, or do you recommend medication for someone with BP?
Right. I don't think therapy is the only way to go. I think there are lots of ways to go, and we each need to find the thing that is most appropriate for us.
Mhm.
And I think for the vast majority of people, that will be therapy, in its various forms, whether that's a group therapy or a one-on-one therapy or DBT or something like that. And I think, certainly in this day and age where it's difficult to get any treatment at all, if
Mhm.
something is offered, take it.
Okay.
Don't dismiss anything.
Hmm.
I would say, try it and stick with it. And if something doesn't work, then it doesn't work, and you're no worse off than you were before you started trying.
Hmm.
You know, when it comes to medication, once again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not somebody who can tell you what medication is good or bad or anything like that. I would always say, if your doctor has prescribed you medication, then you should take the medication that your doctor has given you.
Hmm.
Um, I've never taken any
Okay,
for BPD
that's
personally.
okay.
Um, that said, I was, having spent sort of 20 years of my life on antidepressants
Hmm.
that ultimately did nothing.
Nothing,
I
yeah.
was very anti-medication with regards to my own treatment. I didn't want to swap out the antidepressants and get onto something else that I had to take every day for the rest of my life. And
Hmm.
so it wasn't something that I ever explored or have any experience with. I do hear from people who have positive benefits from it. And so that's why I would always say, if your doctor is giving you medicine, take the medicine your doctor is giving you. Don't don't take that kind of advice from a YouTube channel. That's down to the doctors. Um, but it does seem to me that medication is all well and good, but I still think unless you're dealing with your trauma, with your
Hmm.
fear, with
It's not
all of the
enough.
emotional cause, then the medication is not going to entirely solve your problem. But again, I everything I think should be taken on a person by person, case by case basis, that sort of thing. And I certainly wouldn't tell anybody not to take medication.
Mhm. Okay, yeah. So, but medication and not therapy is a must, though, right? Is
Sorry, say that again.
medication or not, therapy is a must, right? Is what you would recommend.
I think so.
Hmm.
I definitely. I mean, look, I would recommend that everybody be in help in therapy once a
Yeah,
week.
no,
It's
absolutely.
it,
Like,
you know, it's a great thing for anybody. And so, yeah, if you're suffering from mental health difficulties and can get therapy, do
Mhm.
the therapy. Oh
Mhm.
gosh, do the therapy, because we're not talking about an invasive medical treatment. We're not talking about something that is difficult to deal with. It's not like chemotherapy or something like that. It really is just sitting and talking to someone for an hour. There's only so much harm that can do.
Yeah.
So try it, give it a go if you can do it.
Mhm.
And I think I view it as essential, but
Mhm.
again, not a doctor. But I think
I think
that,
I do
yeah,
agree with
it,
you
it
on
certainly doesn't harm you. It is
that.
just talking.
Yeah, exactly. So, I actually think, irrespective of personality disorder, no, everyone should go to therapy. um,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
regardless. So, oh, that's for sure. But listen, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so, so much. And
It's been a pleasure.
I will be posting this interview on YouTube later, but I will be taking little clips. If there's anything in particular you don't want me to touch, just let me know. I will cut. I mean, this it's a huge recording right from the beginning. I'll be cutting a lot of pieces. Um,
Okay.
okay.
But
Like,
no, it's all fine. You feel free to publish whatever you like.
Oh, no, no, I mean, it's a consent. Uh, Thank you so much. And I will keep promoting you on Reframing You forever. Is so
Thank you.
your channel grows. I really hope your channel grows. I really hope people with someone who actually wants to change finds your channel. And I hope they find you through Reframing You, find you directly, however it is. But thank you for doing what you do.
No problem. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Have a lovely day.
You too.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye.
Bye bye. Bye.